I woke up expecting nothing grand, just a text, a call, maybe a slice of cake left on the kitchen table. It was my 41st birthday. I told myself not to expect too much, but there's a difference between low expectations and being invisible. The house was loud with morning noise. Mom was in the kitchen clinking pans like any other Tuesday. My younger brother passed by me in the hallway without a glance. My sister sat on the couch scrolling her phone, laughing at something, not me. No happy birthday. No card. Not even a candle. It was my house. Legally, mine. Granddad left it to me. But I'd be a fool to think anyone remembered that. I made coffee and sat at the counter, checking my phone out of habit. One notification, happy birthday, Mads. Hope today's special somehow. It was from Carla at work. That was it. I sipped my coffee slow, letting the bitterness match my mood. I cleaned the sink, sorted some laundry, fixed the back screen door, again. The hinges kept coming loose. At noon, I heard balloons popping in the living room. Confused, I stepped in to see my niece dancing around streamers. My sister had thrown a birthday party for her daughter. In my house. No one asked me. No one mentioned my day. Don't mind the noise, she said, tossing a half-inflated unicorn balloon at me. We figured we'd just do it here, it's bigger, and Mom said it was fine. I smiled like I didn't want to scream. Later that night, after the last plastic cup had been thrown away and the frosting on the carpet scrubbed off by me, I sat on the porch alone. The string lights were still glowing faintly. I thought about when this place used to feel like home. I remembered Dad's voice years ago, "You're the backbone of this family, Madeline." That was when I'd quit college to help after Mom's stroke. When I was still trying to prove I mattered. But the backbone doesn't get celebrated, it just holds everything up until it cracks. I used to believe things would balance out. That someday, someone would say, "Thank you for everything." Instead, I was watching a trash bag full of wrapping paper slump against the porch step, like even that had a place to go, and I didn't. Back then, I worked 2 part-time jobs, one at the local library, the other at a diner. Every spare dollar went into this house, fixing plumbing, replacing siding, repainting the front porch. The others moved out, found themselves in new cities. I stayed. Someone had to. I thought staying made me dependable. Maybe it just made me easy to ignore. I opened the mailbox the next morning to find it had been relabeled. The small metal nameplate that once read M. Taylor had been replaced. Nothing now. Just blank. I knew who did it. My older brother, he'd been eyeing the house ever since he moved back in after his divorce. It wasn't even subtle. Just gone. Like me. Later that week, during Sunday dinner, someone said, "We'll need to fix up Mom and Dad's place soon." Mom and Dad's place? I nearly choked on my sweet tea. This was my home. I paid for the roof when it leaked. I rewired the ancient breaker box. I kept it standing. But no one looked at me. No one corrected the phrase. My nephew interrupted me when I said something about my house while pouring iced tea. "You mean Grandma's house," he said, casual and sharp. I didn't argue. Not out loud. But I started writing. That night, I opened a blank notebook and began jotting down everything. Every task, every slight, every little erasure. The ink felt like a whisper, quiet but permanent. "They don't see me," I wrote. "They use my space, my time, my effort. And they call it theirs." I cleaned the living room that night while they watched TV, crumbs under their feet, jokes in their mouths. I scrubbed the kitchen while someone shouted over the game. I wiped down the bathroom, again, while the hallway echoed with laughter. I reread what I'd written. They've erased me, haven't they? It came out in a whisper, like I was admitting it to the walls. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of years, of service, of swallowed words. They didn't forget my birthday. They never intended to remember. The party had been over for days, but something still hung in the air, like smoke that clings to fabric. The kind you can't see, but it follows you. I was folding towels in the hallway when Mom approached me, her tone casual, too casual. "We're going to need your room," she said. "Just temporarily. We're turning it into storage for now, just until we get things sorted." I looked at her, waiting for the joke. Nothing. She added, "We thought the basement could be more private for you." Private. That word rang in my ears like a dull thud. I stood in the doorway of what used to be mine, 4 faded walls where I'd nursed migraines, cried in silence, and kept myself small. Now, my suitcase waited at the top of the basement stairs like a loyal dog, confused why it had to move. I carried it down step by step. The basement smelled of wet concrete and forgotten holidays. Boxes stacked against the walls held my siblings' yearbooks, trophies, old Halloween costumes. Nothing of mine. Not even the blanket I once sewed with Grandma. Dad walked past, glancing down the stairs. "Hey, at least you'll have your own space down there, huh?" he said with a smile that didn't ask how I felt. My fingers traced the cracked wall where damp spots were starting to bloom. I stood in silence, watching dust catch in the sliver of afternoon light. I thought about all the times I'd put myself second, third, last. I hadn't been moved downstairs. I'd been pushed out. That night, they had dinner upstairs. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, something fried, I could smell it all drifting through the vents. I stayed below, my plate in my lap, a soda can sweating on the floor. I texted Mom, "Should I come up?" 1 hour later, the reply came, "It's fine, we're almost done." Almost done. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Laughter floated down the stairs. Forks on plates. My name, once or twice, in stories I couldn't hear fully. Maybe distance is the only language they understand. I thought of Maya Angelou. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. I wrote that down on the back of an old receipt I found in my coat pocket. I wasn't going to let this place swallow me whole. Cleaning became a ritual. A way to make the space mine, even if it wasn't home. In the corner near the washer, I found a stack of open mail. Junk at first, ads, flyers. But deeper down, I saw it. Envelopes. Bank letters. My name printed, then scribbled over. I sat on the cement floor, back against the dryer, flipping through each one. Mortgage statements. Refinancing documents. Loan agreements. All in my name. Crossed out. Co-signed. Altered. I walked upstairs slowly, clutching the paper like it might crumble. Mom was rinsing dishes. I held out the envelope. "Why is my name on this? Why didn't anyone tell me?" She didn't look up. "It's just paperwork, honey. You don't need to understand everything. We needed it handled, and you're part of the family. Part of the family." I turned the words over like spoiled fruit. I went back downstairs and downloaded a voice recording app. From that night on, every conversation with them went into my phone. I began to see the house not just as walls, but as a ledger. I pulled old receipts from the kitchen drawer, roof repairs, plumbing bills, insulation, pest control. All mine. Granddad once told me, if you want to know who owns a house, check who fixes the leaks. I whispered that quote like a prayer, setting up my laptop on a folding table in the corner. The basement stopped being exile, it became a vault. My vault. Each creak from the floor above felt like a ghost of a moment they talked over me. Every sigh from the pipes reminded me I was still there, still holding it all together. Then, late one night, as I was organizing files, I heard it. Celine. Upstairs, on the phone, laughing. She doesn't even know half of what's coming. I froze. Not because I was afraid. Because I was awake now. I didn't make a sound. Just sat there, hand on my phone, thumb hovering over record. I closed my eyes. If they think I'm still that quiet girl from before, they're wrong. The next morning started like any other. I was sorting laundry at the foot of the basement stairs when I heard footsteps above me, slow, heavy, pacing the hallway. Then came Celine's voice, sharp and casual, the way people talk when they believe no one's listening. "She'll leave eventually," she said. "That basement's unlivable anyway." My father's low chuckle followed. "She's always been soft. Won't fight back. Never has." For a second, I couldn't breathe. The hum of the washing machine filled the space where my heart should have been beating. I stood still, one sock in my hand, listening to every word like it was being carved into me. I took out my phone and hit record. My thumb shook, but not from fear, from anger. Not the kind that burns fast and loud, but the kind that sits deep and steady, like a tide pulling everything toward it. Their voices faded into another room, but the echo stayed. They weren't just neglecting me, they were planning around me. Strategically erasing me from the family like you erase a pencil mark before it sets too deep. When I finally moved, I went to the small mirror hanging near my bed. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Eyes dull, shoulders slightly bent. A woman disappearing by degrees. I wiped the mirror clean with the sleeve of my shirt. "Who are you now?" I whispered. Later that night, I opened one of the dusty boxes I'd stacked near the furnace. Inside were old photos, birthdays, vacations, graduations. I found mine, high school, the gymnasium stage, me holding a diploma alone. Everyone else had their families crowded around them, arms over shoulders, smiles too wide. Mine was just me, smiling because that's what you do when there's no one to smile back at you. I stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Still, like dust, I'll rise." The words came out steady, not broken. I wrote them on a sticky note and pressed it to the mirror. Then another, "You are not invisible." The next few days blurred together. I kept to myself, barely leaving the basement except for laundry or coffee. Celine began coming downstairs without knocking. "You're lucky we let you stay here," she said once, setting a box on my desk without looking at me. Mom started rationing groceries, claiming everyone's budgeting. I saw takeout bags on the counter every night, Chinese, pizza, fried chicken. None of it for me. I tried to log into my online work one morning, but the connection was gone. The Wi-Fi had been disconnected. "Dad," I asked, leaning against the doorframe of the living room, "is the internet down?" He didn't look up from his paper. "Oh, I canceled the plan. We're cutting unnecessary expenses." "Unnecessary," I repeated softly. No one answered. That night, I pulled out my notebook again. Each page had a date, a small incident, an amount. I was turning silence into evidence. I began researching property laws, inheritance rights, credit fraud, every term I didn't understand, I learned. I found old receipts in a shoebox, roof repairs, plumbing jobs, pest control. My name on all of them. I began copying everything by hand, date by date. If they wanted me quiet, I'd use that quiet like a weapon. Granddad's words echoed again, if you want to know who owns a house, check who fixes the leaks. By midnight, the basement didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a war room. The pipes above creaked, steady and familiar, like the rhythm of my resolve. I started listing names, people who'd seen me pay, people who could vouch for me. Carla from work. Mr. Benson, the old neighbor. My former boss who signed the check I'd used for the roof. Small names, but each one a brick. They expect me to break, I wrote, but I already did. Now I'm rebuilding. A week later, I took the first step. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Everyone was in the kitchen, Mom stirring sauce, Dad scrolling his phone, Celine complaining about something trivial. I walked in, calm. I called a lawyer today, I said. Just to understand things better. The room went silent. Mom froze mid-stir. Celine laughed, short and sharp, the sound of someone scared pretending not to be. Why would you need a lawyer? Dad asked, his voice lower now. Just covering my bases, I said. You know, unnecessary things. No one spoke after that. I walked downstairs, the mug of coffee still warm in my hand. My fingers trembled a little, but my face stayed still. At the bottom of the stairs, I paused and looked up at the ceiling. Their voices had gone quiet. That was the first move, I thought. They won't see the next one coming. The envelope wasn't marked urgent. It looked like any other piece of mail, slightly wrinkled, no return address. I opened it while sitting at my basement desk, surrounded by my notes and a lukewarm mug of black coffee. Inside were copies of repair invoices and insurance statements, all listing my name. But something didn't sit right. Every one of them showed payments, thousands of dollars, deposited into my father's account. I read each page twice. Once with disbelief. Again with clarity. That's when the pattern surfaced. Every plumbing fix, roof patch, termite treatment I paid for had been spun through a quiet sleight of hand, rerouted for their benefit. They didn't just use me, they erased me from the credit of every contribution I'd made. I whispered to myself, almost to steady the fury rising in my chest, when you see something that is not right, not fair, you must say something. Then came the real blow, another envelope, thicker. This one from Quentin Holloway, the attorney I'd reached out to. His tone was neutral, but the contents weren't. The original will, drafted before any revisions, named me as the sole heir to the house. No caveats. No conditions. Just my name. I leaned back in my chair, the basement hum filling the silence. My fingers ran over the edge of the paper. I wasn't just the one fixing the leaks. I owned the house. That evening, dinner smelled of garlic and beef. Laughter carried from the dining room upstairs. I climbed halfway up the stairs and paused. Then kept walking. They looked up as I entered. I didn't sit. I met with a lawyer today, I said. Just that. The room froze. Celine's smile didn't drop all the way, but it twitched at the corners. My mother's fork hovered midair, and Dad blinked like I'd just spoken a language he hadn't heard in years. I turned and walked back down without waiting for a response. Back in my space, I pulled open a drawer and grabbed the folder with service receipts. The new printer Rowan helped me pick up hum to life as I scanned them. I copied backup files onto a flash drive, labeled it, and placed it in a tin under my bed. They know I know. That phrase echoed louder than their laughter ever did. The next few days, I watched the mood shift in the house. Slight but sharp. A guest asked my father, "Isn't Vesper still living downstairs?" He fumbled through a vague reply while my mother fake laughed and steered the topic to pot roast. I didn't stay long. Out on the porch later, a neighbor waved from across the street. She held the gaze for a second longer than usual, just enough to say, "I see you." It wasn't just me noticing things anymore. In an old box under the guest bed, I found something unexpected. A leather notebook. Mom's handwriting. She used to journal more when she thought no one paid attention. I flipped through dates and scattered thoughts until I found the page from 2017. One sentence, penned in shaky lines: "If Vesper moves into the house, I'll lose the respect of my peers." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I closed the notebook and set it aside. That night, I clicked on my old laptop and opened a fresh spreadsheet. Timeline. Task list. Backup contact log. Freeze access to shared accounts. War isn't always loud. I called Quinton. Asked Rowan to check something on the county site. I emailed the contractor who installed the bay window, asked if he still had a copy of the invoice in my name. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war. The next morning, I walked outside and unscrewed the name label on the mailbox. I replaced it with a new one, V. Rhodes. I didn't hide while doing it. Celine saw me from her car window. She stopped, just for a second. That was enough. I walked back inside, pulled out the photo folder. Granite countertops. Crown molding. The custom shutters I paid for. I placed them in a new folder labeled Improvements, Personal Investment. That evening, as the sun set across the hills of Santa Clarita, I stood outside. For the first time in a long while, I breathed in, not to brace myself, but to reclaim the air around me. They say the house is their legacy. But I built the legacy. And now, I make the rules. I called for the meeting on Sunday afternoon. I asked for just the four of us, Mom, Dad, Celine, and me, no distractions, no side conversations. The kitchen was quiet when I walked in, sunlight slanted across the blinds, dust motes floating in the warm air. I placed a manila folder on the table and opened it. Inside, receipts, renovation invoices, mortgage statements, all proof of every dollar I had put into the house. I said calmly, "This is the timeline of every repair I funded." I watched their faces. Mom looked away, Dad leaned back, Celine's lips pressed together. Then I dropped the final detail. I said, "I spoke with the property assessor. The title has remained under my name until recent fraudulent changes." Silence. My mother said, "That's old paperwork." My father muttered, "You're being dramatic again." I replied, "No, I'm being precise." Their casual dismissal felt like a cold slap, but I met it with clarity. There was no tremble in my voice, just quiet certainty. The next moment was calm but razor sharp. I set the folder closed on the table and said, "If any further action is taken in my name or with my property, I will pursue full legal action." The room froze. Celine stood, scoffed, "Are you threatening us?" I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "I'm giving you a chance to stop before I have to protect myself fully." I quoted Eleanor Roosevelt, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." My mother's face hardened, voice low, "You're tearing this family apart." I stayed seated. Then maybe it was never together to begin with. I saw the hurt in Dad's eyes, not for me, but for the facade he'd maintained. For years I carried the house, the repairs, the cost. Now I carried the decision. In the days that followed, the conversation never happened again. They treated the Sunday like it never occurred. But Celine started posting online, vague remarks about family drama and how some people go off the rails. A family friend called me late one night to check if I was okay, implying I wasn't. I took screenshots, filed it away. Rowan said over coffee, "They're trying to make you doubt your own reality. Don't let them." I found a spot at the local library and worked remotely, keeping all communications and files away from the house. The tension dropped slightly, but a sharper undercurrent developed. Even their silence felt aggressive. I met again with Quentin, my estate lawyer. He found proof that my parents had attempted, just last week, to list the house in a trust under Celine's name. He handed me the document from the county recorder's office, a draft, and signed, but real. This wasn't mere neglect. It was planning. I printed the record, scanned it, stored copies in 3 places. I thought of my grandfather's words, "If you want to know who owns a house, check who fixes the leaks." I told Quentin, "They already saw me as a threat, let them keep thinking that." I wrote a cease and desist letter. I prepared the notice to reclaim title. I even handwrote a final note to my family, not begging, not accusing. Just facts. In the early evening, I walked to my car under the Santa Clarita sky, dusk settling. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't feel regret. I felt something new, ownership. Rivals intimidate you when they think you don't know. I had seen their strategy. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was ready. The certified mail arrived on a Thursday morning, plain white envelope, urgent stamp in bold, addressed to me in my own house. I paused in front of the kitchen drawer before opening it. My father's house, the one I paid for every bit of, now handing me false accusations. They claimed I had been harassing the family, creating a hostile environment, and demanded I vacate the home. I felt betrayal in real time. That ledger I built, the basement I reclaimed, it suddenly felt like hostage territory. I rang Quentin. He got back to me within hours. He said their threat was baseless, but said something heavier, "They're going to get nastier." I clenched my teeth. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was war. And I realized I wasn't the only one funding it. Celine had hired the attorney, used funds from a joint account I helped set up. I stared at the paper. My name's still on the title. I exhaled. They couldn't force me out. Not legally. Not when I owned what they were pretending to control. That evening I came home and found chaos. My room, my designated space, rummaged through. Clothes strewn across the floor. A stack of old tax returns missing. My laptop gone. Later I saw it in the kitchen, open, hard drive wiped clean. My stomach dropped. Then I found the flash drive I'd hidden, gone. A yellow post-it stuck to the dining table, "You asked for war." Here it is. My heart hammered. The garage code had been changed too. I had to call a locksmith to regain access to my own car. Rowan called around 10 p.m. and said, "You might want to stay somewhere else tonight." I replied, "This is my home. They don't get to erase me." My inner fire roared. I wasn't scared. I was furious. Firm. Ready. The next morning, I moved cautiously. Inside the house, the silent treatment became active cruelty. No one made eye contact in the living room. Meals started without me. Doors locked behind me when I walked past. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, the antidepressant bottle on my nightstand, one I never bought. I listened to Celine's voice in the hallway. Maybe she should be evaluated. My chest tightened. They weren't just trying to walk me out, they were trying to make me seem unstable. I started documenting everything. My phone recorded whispers, camera snapped doors closing in my face, receipts turned into logs. The tension forced me awake. My thoughts sharpened. I told myself, I will not be dismissed. With Quentin we took the next step. That Friday I sat in the courthouse lobby, a folder packed with evidence, the lawyer's letter, the ransacked room pictures, the flash drive gone, the online records of title changes. The clerk looked up and said flatly, "You're not the first to report this address this year." My pulse went icy. Someone else was outed from their home. And that document showed Celine's name. I walked out clutching the official restraining order. Copies went on the fridge, the basement door, the front hall bulletin board. I returned home and placed the papers in plain view so everyone saw they were no longer dealing with the quiet girl they ignored. My warning was legal now, formalized, undeniable. I woke early, long before the sun warmed the walls. I walked barefoot into the basement, my workspace, my bunker, my proof. The folder still sat where I left it, beside the lamp that hummed low like a steady breath. I looked at the photos I printed, me laying tile, caulking baseboards, sealing granite counters. Every square inch touched by my hands. Paid by my hours. It used to feel like survival. Now it looked like evidence. There's a quote I read once, "It's not about who pushes you down, it's about who helps you rise." Except this time, no one helped me up. I rose on my own. I checked my phone. Celine's post, where she hinted I was unwell, had exploded overnight. DMs from old schoolmates, messages from neighbors, even a coworker I hadn't seen in years. "Are you okay? Is this true?" I didn't reply to any. But something shifted. I wasn't hiding anymore. I sent an email to the contractor who did the bay window. Asked him for a dated statement, just simple words on official letterhead. No drama. Just facts. By noon, I met Quentin at a cafe across from the courthouse. Neutral ground. We sat in the back, out of sight, sorting through documents. He wore his usual charcoal gray, tapping each page like a drumbeat. "Your sister's maneuver with the trust doesn't hold. No taxes filed for 3 years. It collapses on itself." I didn't smile. I just nodded. He slid a new document across the table. "Also," he said, lowering his voice, "there were prior attempts to transfer the deed, 2019, 2021, never completed, but they tried." I stared at the years. I was right to keep everything. I decided to go public, on my terms. I filmed a short message for the neighborhood Facebook group. Just me sitting near the bay window, explaining the work I did on the house, the history, the truth. I didn't blame. I didn't name names. I just reclaimed space. That evening, before the meeting with the real estate attorney, I walked the house. Touched the frame around the bay window. Ran my hand along the edge of the staircase. At the base, I stood still. I could almost hear echoes of that old conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I wasn't hiding in the basement. I was rebuilding. I handed them the official document during dinner. Title, Property Ownership Statement, Vesper Blaze. I watched their faces. My father didn't speak. My mother blinked hard. Celine left the table. I didn't flinch. I returned to the basement. Packed one small bag. Left the folder of renovations and title copies on the kitchen table, just in case they forgot who owned what. The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. That line followed me as I walked up the stairs and stepped outside. The sun had dipped low. Streetlights blinked on one by one. I stood at the curb and exhaled. Then my phone buzzed. A message. No name. No greeting. Just, the same firm worked on 2 other houses here. Check case 15-420. My eyes narrowed. This wasn't just about me. There was a pattern. Something bigger. I looked back at the house. The porch light was on. Curtains drawn. They probably thought it was over. But I whispered to myself, this was never just about my story. It's about every house that hides a secret. I turned toward the car, keys in hand. My grip was steady. I'm done hiding. They'll see me now. That message sat in my inbox like a cold drop of rain. Could it be real? I opened it early one Thursday, while the house was quiet, and read the lines again, case XV420, same law firm. I didn't move for a minute. Then I spent the morning cross-referencing names. Celine's appeared in another property dispute 2 years ago. The pattern nagged at me, an elderly aunt, pushed from her home, same attorney. My eyes burned as I reached out to the plaintiff's lawyer. He confirmed the documents had irregular power of attorney signatures. The firm I thought was only after my family? It wasn't just them. Then the shift hit, I wasn't the exception. I was part of a system. If it happened to her, I told myself, it can happen again unless I make noise. I closed the laptop and breathed sharp. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel afraid. I felt prepared. I printed both case files, mine and the one from 2 years ago, and sat at the kitchen table under the afternoon light. The notary who signed both was the same woman, a former high school friend of Celine's. Her license had been revoked, yet she appeared in the chain of papers through a shell company. I slid the documents toward Quentin in our meeting and watched his face go hard. This is no longer a family dispute. This is fraud, he said. I felt the heat in my cheeks, not from confusion but from recognition. My anger burned steady, purposeful. I began drafting a letter to the district attorney's office. I titled it simply, Investigation Request, Potential Predatory Real Estate Scheme. I gathered the receipts, the mismatched signatures, the silent victims' names. Evening came, but I stayed at the desk until midnight, watching the glow of the monitor reflect on receipts I had long forgotten I owned. I knew speaking out would make this public, but I didn't care. I filmed a short video on my phone in the basement, not for the family, but for others like me. I looked into the camera and said, I inherited this home. I funded the repairs. I fought to keep it. And they tried to erase both me and it. If you're watching this, so this doesn't happen to you. The video gained traction quickly. A comment popped up, my aunt's house in Fresno, same kind of thing. I sat back and watched messages flood in, caretakers, siblings, aging parents who lost homes. I felt something like relief, a strange mix of sadness and vindication. Quentin raised caution, hire a media lawyer. I shook my head. They erased me. Now I'll speak louder. The view count climbed. The story wasn't mine alone anymore, it was for hundreds who had been quietly erased. My father's voicemail came just after noon. It buzzed while I was in the basement, scanning documents. He said, I didn't know everything. But I didn't stop it either. I'm sorry. The words rolled out slow and raw. I paused the recording and leaned back. On the fridge, I saw a note taped, You made your choice. We'll make ours. I read it when I arrived to collect the last of my things. I didn't show it. I left a folder of the key documents on the kitchen table. I stepped outside and the air felt crisp. I whispered, "You already did. I'm just not pretending anymore." I locked the door behind me, walked to my car under the fading light, and didn't look back. The house stayed lit, porch light on, curtains theatrically drawn, but I no longer lived there. I lived in truth. I moved into a little house in Santa Rosa, the kind realtors call charming when they mean needs work. The porch sagged, the floors creaked with every step, and the plumbing had its moods. But it was mine. No shared deeds, no legal threats, just a place with locks I controlled. I started therapy. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to keep track of the pieces I'd put back together. My therapist was a woman in her 60s, calm, candid, and without the smugness I'd feared. In our third session, she told me her own story. Family. Real estate. Inheritance twisted into leverage. Her eyes held mine when she said, "What happened to you doesn't get to define you. What you do with it will." I nodded. That stuck. I started journaling every night, mostly raw thoughts, questions I'd never dared ask myself, memories I'd long edited to survive. My dreams changed too. No more arguments. No shouting matches. Just silence and space. After a week of thinking, I sat down to write one last letter to my father. It wasn't a plea or a request for reconciliation. I didn't soften it to win his approval. It was plain spoken. Factual. Measured. "You raised me to believe loyalty was everything," I wrote. "But what you really meant was obedience." I sealed the letter, mailed it, and didn't expect a reply. A month passed. Then, one afternoon, a plain envelope arrived. Inside was a typed response. It was from him, technically. But it read like someone else wrote it, no warmth, no questions, no sense of ownership. Just distance. And I felt nothing. I folded the paper, slid it into a box I labeled proof, and set it on a shelf. That wasn't closure. It was confirmation. Something in me shifted after that. I started volunteering at a local center that worked with teens aging out of foster care. Kids who knew what it meant to be cast aside. One boy asked me, "What made you keep going?" I thought for a second, then told him, realizing the silence wasn't mine to carry. I began co-writing a curriculum on housing literacy, teaching these kids how to read contracts, recognize predatory terms, know their rights. We partnered with a nonprofit, and a few weeks later, a local paper picked up our story. No names. Just themes. That night, I received an email from a woman across the state. She said her parents had tricked her out of a property left to her and her siblings. Her words, "You reminded me I'm not crazy. Just not invisible anymore." I stared at the screen for a while, hand resting on the mouse. Then I wrote back. Not advice. Just acknowledgement. Sometimes, that's all someone needs. A few weeks later, I found myself driving past the old house. It looked different, new paint, trimmed hedges, new mailbox. I didn't stop. I just parked across the street and stared for a minute. I whispered, "I'm not here for you anymore." Then someone called my name. I turned. It was one of the neighbors, the one who used to bring over fresh oranges. She looked surprised to see me. "They moved out a while ago," she said. "Told everyone you lost it. That you went off." I smiled softly. "Then they never really knew me." She didn't ask more. She just nodded, like she understood. That night, I sat on my couch by the fire in my little creaky house. I opened a drawer and pulled out an old note I'd once written to myself, during the worst stretch of it all. It read, "You are not disposable. You are not small. You are enough." I didn't cry. I just sat still, watching the fire crackle, letting those words land fully. Maybe that house was never mine to keep. But the life I rebuilt afterward? That, every bit of it, is mine.